Throughout history, there have been many events that the human race has witnessed. The first trip to the moon in July 1969 by Apollo 11 is perhaps one of the most impressive. This mission is credited as being the first mission in which humans landed and walked on the moon. From that moment on, there have been many more missions in regards to space, with NASA recently coming forward and saying that they hope to go back to the moon within the next few years. One of the most recent discoveries that researchers announced is that there's living creatures on the moon. Scientists have said that right now thousands of tiny creatures could be living on the moon. This initially excited many people, as when the headlines broke, many took this as life being discovered outside of our planet. The story detailed how after an Israeli lunar landing ship crashed on the surface of the moon, it released many creatures onto the lunar surface. These incredible creatures that managed to survive in the void are known as tardigrades. These represent a truly resilient form of life. They were chosen because of their ability to survive practically all kinds of natural planetary phenomena. They are called extremophiles. That means that they are resistant to extreme conditions and have the ability to survive in space. They can withstand up to 12 times more radiation than the rest of the living beings. Also, high pressures, extreme high or low temperatures such as -200 degrees and 150 degrees. And the reason why they're believed to have survived the forced landing of the Israeli ship is because they have a prolonged dehydration capacity, which allows them to go even 10 years without consuming water. So how are these incredible creatures able to survive in space? Their cellular composition allows them to survive in environments such as water, air and vacuum. The tardigrades inhabit the Earth's surface, especially in layers that cover mosses, lichens and ferns. They can also inhabit ocean waters or fresh water, although due to their capacity for resistance, it's possible they are found in every space on the planet. These small creatures have an oval shape, 8 clawed legs, a central nervous system and reproductive apparatus. Interestingly though, they lack circulatory and respiratory systems. They are very small. However, adults can be seen with the naked eye as they can reach a length of 0.5 mm, while the smaller ones are only 0.05 mm long. There are many investigations that have been carried out in regards to tardigrades. In 2016, scientists in Japan managed to revive some tardigrades who had been frozen for around 30 years. In 1948, an Italian biologist hydrated some tardigrades found in a sample of dry moss. They had been preserved since 1828. As the days passed, signs of slight movement could be seen in one of the creatures, but it then stopped moving. A Russian space mission was launched in 2007, and included in this mission was a set of tardigrades who were exposed to the vacuum and intense radiation of low Earth orbit. They were exposed to this for 10 days. In this mission, the resistance of these creatures were tested, and incredibly they not only managed to survive, but even maintain their ability to reproduce. After a space mission, the Russian team found living tardigrades in the rocket deck that just arrived from outer space. Finally, the scientists of the Israeli mission sent to the lunar territory assured that the tardigrades cannot move nor reproduce on the surface of the moon, but they can remain in a state of hibernation for 10 years, or at least until they are transported and rehydrated in order to wake up from the state of hibernation. Another thing researchers have said about our moon is that astronauts warmed up the moon. Since the first space missions to the moon, many discoveries have been made, but there are more unanswered questions that arise when thinking about the lunar surface and the infinite mysteries it holds. One of these questions in the midst of the scientific community was the temperature of the moon, and how this was influenced by the sun, which is why different lunar missions manned by Apollo installed some thermal sensors, specifically in the years 1971 and 1972. The crew installed these sensors in order to know the temperature and changes that could be recorded from that moment on. Surprisingly, the data showed an increase in temperature in the 1970s. The increase would be approximately 2 degrees Celsius. Up until now, no precise explanation has been found as to why this is happening, but it is possible to determine that the warming was caused by the astronauts. In 2010, the original radio transmissions were obtained again, 440 magnetic tapes in total, which contained data on the temperature which until then had been kept hidden. At the beginning of the transmissions, only those taken between 1971 and 1974 were analysed, leaving the transmissions from 1975 to 1977 unrevised. These were the dates when the temperature probe stopped working. Years later, those transmissions were recovered and the question of the warming of the moon was solved. The answer to that question was that as time went on after the astronauts had been to the moon, the heat spread from the surface to the interior, something that is not very normal, and strangely enough the interior and exterior have less and less differences in temperature. The data that could be obtained in places where the transmissions were made showed that the cause of the temperature increase is due to the tracks left by the astronauts. These are visible and a little darker than the rest of the surface. This discovery is interesting because if the heating was due to the human presence, this means that the first analysis in which the heat was only concentrated on the surface was correct. The moon reflects the waves of the galaxy. A group of scientists obtained a method by which it's possible to receive information regarding the beginning of the universe through this Earth satellite. Some time ago, a radio telescope captured that the moon not only manages to reflect sunlight, but that its surface could also reflect radio waves that can be emitted from any end of the Milky Way. Until then, it had not been possible to know exactly the shape of the first galaxies or even the first stars, which is why scientists decided to use the surface of the moon as a mirror, in which waves created millions of years ago can be reflected, and thus obtain enough information to create an image of how the formations of stars or entire galaxies could have been since the beginning of time. In order to use this method, it's fundamental to have a complete study of the moon's surface, its characteristics such as the regular waves it reflects, or the radio emissions according to its temperature. If none of these data are available, it may be very difficult to differentiate these waves from those that may be emitted by the Milky Way. Searching for waves in space is no simple task. Waves from an early universe can be very faint compared to waves from not so ancient and much brighter objects. For example, travelling stars or electrons. It's interesting that even this technique must take into account the brightness of the Earth. The Earth can emit waves towards the moon, and consequently these will be reflected back to the telescopes. Therefore the signal will be contaminated with unnecessary information, so these waves have to be excluded from the analysis of information obtained by the radio telescope. This technique allows researchers to obtain a measure of the intensity of the waves received from the Milky Way, as they are reflected back to the moon. Finally, there is still much more we can discover about the moon. We only need to pay more attention and spend more time observing and studying this incredible satellite, which seems to have some great secrets. For many years humans have looked up to the moon and wondered how it was formed. Right after the Sun came into existence billions of years ago, other planets in the solar system began to take shape. However, the moon was not formed until hundreds of millions of years later. Scientists have debated the origin of the moon, and while some of these theories are still regarded as potential answers, other theories have been thrown out the window over time. Three major theories on how the moon was formed are the giant impact hypothesis, the co-formation theory, and the capture theory. According to the giant impact hypothesis, a Mars-sized body called Theia crashed into the Earth around 4.5 billion years ago. The debris from the collision combined into a solitary round body orbiting the Earth and eventually made the moon. The co-formation hypothesis states that the moon formed in orbit around the Earth at the same time the Earth was formed. In 2012, it was suggested that the Earth and the moon were formed at the same time after a collision caused by two huge bodies. The capture system theory looks at the moon being formed somewhere within the solar system before it was snatched by the Earth. This theory may explain the difference in the composition of the Earth and the moon, but most captured bodies are not spherical in shape like the moon. So what do you make of these interesting moon discoveries? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.